It's December, that time of the year where we snuggle up with our family and rewatch all of our favorite Christmas classics. Only which Christmas classics are actually classics and which ones aren't actually very good? Today we're going to do a top Christmas movie tier list. As we go into this, if you want to create your own Christmas movie tier list, the link is down below in the description where I created mine. If you make one, take a screenshot of it, share it over on your Instagram stories, and tag me, and I will share some of your Christmas tier list. So for this, I tried to pick 15 Christmas movies spanning multiple different decades. Some of them from way back in the day, some from my childhood, some from the last few years. Some are serious, some are very juvenile and childish. I wanted kind of the full spectrum, but they also had to be movies I have seen fairly recently to be able to rank them with integrity. Now, the way we're going to do this, I took all of these different movies and I looked up their Rotten Tomatoes scores. We're going to start with the movie with the lowest Rotten Tomatoes score all the way up to the one with the highest Rotten Tomatoes score, and then I will place them on my tier ranking. With all that said, let's get started. We're kicking things off with Jingle All the Way, the Christmas movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sinbad. And the reason we are kicking off our little tier list with this movie is because its Rotten Tomato score is only a 20%. Now, what do I think about Arnold Schwarzenegger's Christmas movie? I'm throwing it way down in the C tier. Love you, Arnold. Only want the best for you. I wish that you delivered a Christmas classic, but your pursuit of a Turbo Man for your son is just not it on pretty much every single level. It's not. It kind of has like a kind of a terrible message in it about consumerism and just like really bad behavior from parents. Everyone is so selfish, mean-spirited. The humor I don't think really works. So the only thing going for it is the charm and charisma of the cast. Beyond that, this quest for a Turbo Man, it really doesn't work for me. Next up, Ernest Saves Christmas. Now, this is one I watched all the time back in the day growing up. It came on cable television or whatever, and I watched, Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Scared Stupid, Ernest Goes to Jail, the Ernest's TV show, all of that fun stuff way back in the day. And then I hadn't watched this movie for probably over 25 years, maybe 30 years. Just last night, watched it with my kids. Rotten Tomato score, 36%. Another one not particularly liked by the critics. How did I feel about it all these years later? We're throwing this one in the D category. This is purely for children that like really juvenile humor. There's a couple little jokes here and there that are like, oh, that's a little clever, that's a little bit fun. But even on so many levels, it just feels like such a dry film, where even it's lacking music to fill things out, to kind of bring it to life, where so many Christmas movies have these lively scores. This one doesn't have anything like that. And so it just relies on the fact that you like Ernest, Jim Varney making a bunch of really silly faces. And that's about it. That's like all this movie has to offer. It's just such lowbrow, low-hanging fruit in the style that was popular quite literally 35 years ago. Then we got How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the Jim Carrey edition. Critics only gave this movie a 49%, but it is a movie that absolutely has a loyal following of people that think that this movie is fantastic. Now, I only watched it for the first time just a few years back, and I am not one of its loyal fans that think that it's fantastic and a Christmas classic. It's going down in the C tier. I didn't get this one like at all. Of course, there's some fun to the set design. Of course, Jim Carrey playing the Grinch is legendary. So there's elements in here that I think worked, but generally speaking, when you're taking this short little story and expanding it, inevitably you're throwing things in there that I don't think actually complement the story. In the case of this one, this whole backstory on how the Grinch is actually misunderstood and was bullied, like, I don't think that serves the story or the message at all. There's a bunch of stuff in there that's just kind of nasty that I think distracts from the message of how the Grinch stole Christmas. There's parts in it that are creepy. There's base level, simplistic humor. So this is one of those ones that after hearing a bunch of people say how great it was for many years, I did not find it to be great. Today's video is sponsored by Factor. Notice how the days are getting shorter, but your to-do list is getting longer? Let Factor help you use your time more efficiently. They take shopping, prepping, cooking, and cleaning off your daily list of things to do. You can stay fed and energized with America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service. Factor lets you do you. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. Whatever you're interested in, Factor has you covered with 35 different delicious meals every week and over 60 additional convenience items. Because Factor's meals are chef prepared and dietitian approved, you're going to love not only how Factor's meals taste, but how they support your goals. And here's a big one in the month of December when you're buying gifts for all of your loved ones. Factor is cheaper than takeout or dining out. Head to factormeals.com/50SeanChandler and use code 50SeanChandler to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code 50SeanChandler at factormeals.com/50SeanChandler to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping while your subscription is active. Then we have Dr. Seuss's The Grinch. This is the Illumination film. Critics gave this a 60%. If you don't know, the line between fresh and rotten with Rotten Tomatoes is 60%. So this movie is fresh, but quite literally the lowest fresh score a movie can have. Like, I view Illumination as kind of being the kings of low-hanging fruit, that they know what their target audience wants, and that's exactly what they deliver. They don't never really have lofty ambitions or anything like that. It's literally, let's serve the basic demands of our audience, and that's kind of what this felt like to me. It's good enough, it's charming enough, so it'll go in the B category. It doesn't try to be a new classic version of the story. It doesn't go too overboard in trying to flesh out the story and getting weird with it. It's an enjoyable enough version with lots of silly little humor. My kids enjoy it. In particular, Karis has gone down the Grinch rabbit hole many different times. So they know how to make movies that are superficially entertaining, and that's what they did here. That'll bring us to Home Alone, a beloved Christmas classic that only has a 66% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, granted, that does mean that 2 out of 3 critics recommend the film, but it also means that a full third of critics were like, Home Alone? Nah. As for me, this goes up in the S tier, obviously. This is a timeless Christmas classic. There is just something about the magic of the Home Alone formula that it is just as effective now as it was over 30 years ago when it came out. Like, I was the perfect age for when the movie released because Macaulay Culkin is just a pinch older than me, so I was like just the right age of Kevin when it debuted. And it manages to, like, it's most famous for, of course, the third act with all the traps and everything like that, but it's a sweet, fun, charming, quotable, memorable Christmas movie before that. And for all these things you can nitpick about how awful the McAllisters are and everything like that, it just has that spark, just has the magic. And so, like, my family, we'll just throw this movie on in the middle of July, even obviously not Christmas season, but it's just such a rewatchable, entertaining, feel-good movie. And I watched it every year growing up, and now my kids want to rewatch it every year growing up. We've already rewatched both Home Alone 1 and 2. Next up, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. This one has a 71%. As for me, this is one I grew up with. It is definitely going in the A category. This is another one that it feels like every single scene in here is iconic. It's memorable. It has found a way to like make its way into the zeitgeist, the popular culture to such an extreme level to where when you see the house in the neighborhood with all the Christmas lights on it, that's the Griswolds. There's so many different things like that that come out of this movie. I don't think it quite fully has kind of that Christmas magic that I think puts something on that top level for me, but it's so funny. It's one that my wife doesn't like Clark, and so we hadn't really watched it together for a long time, so watched it with the whole family for the first time just last year. Kids are still laughing out loud. There's so many bits that just absolutely work in here. Moving right along, we have The Santa Claus, the Tim Allen Christmas movie. Critics gave it a 73%, which is interesting to me that this movie would have a higher Rotten Tomatoes score than Home Alone. That's sometimes fascinating to me, the way the world of Rotten Tomatoes and aggregators work. Whatever. For me, this is a B-tier Christmas movie where, based pretty much entirely on the strength of Tim Allen and his, just kind of working class, middle class charm and charisma and crankiness. He carries this movie on his shoulders. Since the film itself, the basic premise is pretty weird premise that guy accidentally kills Santa Claus and puts on his clothes and becomes Santa Claus because of the Santa Claus. That is such a bizarre, weird premise for a movie. And then as you dive into when you start getting into the point in the movie where the low point for the characters, and you have the setup, you build up, and then you have the low point before the big finale. That's way movies are typically designed. The way they do the big low point in this movie is that this guy's ex-wife thinks he's crazy, so gets the lawyers involved to take his son away from him so he loses custody because they think he's crazy because he actually is turning into Santa Claus. So another one, what a weird message to throw into a Christmas movie. But at the end of the day, it's still fun. It still is able to actually capture the right vibe despite having a bunch of less than stellar ideas that don't actually, if you just stop, you just pause and think about this movie and what's actually happening, doesn't really tap into the Christmas spirit. Manslaughter, dead guy, let's put on his clothes. What? What a divorce? Yeah, custody battles puts me in the Christmas mood. That'll bring us to a more recent edition, Violent Night, a movie that took the kind of concept of, is Die Hard a Christmas movie, and went very literal with it, and did Die Hard with Santa Claus trying to save a family from terrorists. It's got a 74% on Rotten Tomatoes, but this is my kind of Christmas movie. It is going in the A category. As soon as I just saw the premise for it, I was like, all right, that is a movie designed for this guy right here. And having David Harbour as kind of this disgruntled Santa Claus that has to go into Die Hard mode, I love that. That is, for me, that is such great premise. And it's just delivers on the humor as well as the violent action that I want out of a movie with this title and this premise. So yeah, this is an A category one for me. That'll bring us to Elf, the Will Ferrell, Jon Favreau Christmas movie that really propelled each of their careers. Now, of course, Will Ferrell had started movies like Old School before. He, of course, came from Saturday Night Live. But then Elf kind of took it to this whole other level of stardom for him. Has an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. I remember going to go see this movie when it first came out when I was 20, 21 years old. I thought it was so funny. I still think it is so funny. It is going in the S category. This is like just peak Will Ferrell for me, while also being just this very sweet, wholesome Christmas movie that just finds all of the right scenarios to throw Buddy into, and you take such an innocent, sweet, generous, energetic, clueless elf and put him into this cynical world, and he just brings joy to everyone around him. So I think this movie is so charming. It is so funny. It is so S tier. Then we've got A Christmas Story, another one of these ones that I just grew up watching as it was on television every December, all the time. And it is still on television all the time in the month of December. There's literally channels that just play this movie on loop leading up to Christmas. It's got an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's one of those movies that just has very much this just timeless kind of quality to it, that it was a period piece film when it came out like 40 years ago. So it just kind of feels like this thing of the past, but not any specific past. And from beginning to end, every sequence, once again, it's memorable, it's iconic, it's quotable. For me, this is a definite A-tier movie. It makes me laugh. I quote the lines here and there all the time. You know, I don't know that in certain ways I don't enjoy it quite as much as those S-tier movies that I have, but this is a very strong A-tier movie for me that, once again, it just taps into that Christmas spirit, has this wholesome vibe to it while still having like a little edge with certain things in it, but being so sweet, wholesome at the exact same time. And just, once again, so many of those images, so many of the bits about like how many people learned you can't lick metal when it's snowing outside because of this movie. I'm sure if you live in snow climates, you knew that otherwise. But if you're from Texas and California like me, you learned about it from this movie. You'll shoot your eye out. So many things like that that just make it another one of these movies that is so rewatchable for good reason. Then we have the most recent movie on this list, the best Christmas pageant ever. Now, this movie just came out last month. It is based off the Christmas classic book, and it is directed by Dallas Jenkins, the mind behind the TV show The Chosen. Currently has a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. And as for me, my family loved this movie, and so did I. It's going in that A category. It was one of those films that as soon as we watched it, we like turned to each other and went, I think this is a new one of our annual Christmas movies. That it just has this timeless quality to it. One of the things my wife said just after watching the trailer for the film, she felt nostalgia for a film she hadn't seen yet.
Yeah.
How did you go about crafting a film which did kind of elicit that feeling of nostalgia without being derivative of other Christmas classics?
That might be my favorite question and or comment that I've gotten about the film. I said up front, this movie, you shouldn't be able to identify which decade it's in. So I used examples of movies like Babe, Paddington 1 and 2. This should feel like, to a parent, this reminds me of my childhood. It reminds me of then. Here's what we do know. It's not today. It's then. And that was a term that my production designer came up with. We started putting the word then in all of our discussions. Every shot in the movie, we treated like a painting. That's what I think evokes that reaction from your wife, is from frame one, you feel like we're taking you to a place that you're not in currently, but you wish you were.
It's a film that what I loved about it is that it doesn't have any cynicism to it. It has edge, but it has no cynicism. It doesn't feel like the movie's out to get the people that we think are wronging this family. It offers grace to everyone, and because that's what the story is all about, is understanding the true Christmas story, and that it is all about grace, and it is for everyone. So I thought it was funny, heartfelt, and just a new Christmas classic. That'll bring us to the most controversial film on the list, Die Hard. Now, Die Hard has been a film of great cultural divide. It is one of the great cultural clashes of our time. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? And in my mind, I think the argument is pretty clear that this is a Christmas. It's pretty easy, obvious. It's a movie about a man trying to get home to his family to spend Christmas with his family. He goes to a Christmas party where Christmas music is played. Therefore, we have the Christmas setting, Christmas themes about being together with family, Christmas music, Christmas trees. The phrase ho, ho, ho is uttered. That's a Christmas movie. The fact that it's also awesome and an action movie doesn't take away from the Christmassy nature of the whole thing. So for me, easy, obvious, this is a Christmas movie. Now, I'll also say this. Some people try and argue, well, if Die Hard is a Christmas movie, then Lethal Weapon is a Christmas movie. That's not how logic works. You have to actually make an argument for why Lethal Weapon is a Christmas movie. You can't just piggyback off of Die Hard and the actual strong arguments for Die Hard being a Christmas movie. As for me, obviously this is an S tier movie, and I'm confused by anyone that doesn't have it in the S tier. It's the greatest straightforward action movie of all time, meaning not combined with sci-fi, such as the classic Terminator 2 or Predator, something like that. It's a direct action movie with no sci-fi elements. It is the best action movie of all time. It's the best Christmas movie of all time. It's one of the greatest movies of all time that's just stood the test of time. So, of course, we're putting this one in the S tier. Then we have the oldest movie on this list. It's a Wonderful Life. Fun fact, I watched this movie for the very first time just last year, which for the longest time, how have you never seen It's a Wonderful Life? It's like, I don't know. It just never happened. For whatever reason, that's not the movie that we watched in my household in the month of December. And so it just never happened. And then because when I hadn't seen this classic in so long, never was shocked by it, it turned into like, there were expectations on the viewing of it. So I kept delaying watching it for the first time. Finally watched it for the first time last year, and it lived up to its reputation. Now on Rotten Tomatoes, has a 94%. It's one of those movies where you go, what's that 6% that didn't like It's a Wonderful Life? Who are those Scrooges out there in the universe that didn't care for It's a Wonderful Life? That's weird. Also, if we're going to say that Die Hard isn't a Christmas movie, despite the fact that it's at a Christmas party about someone trying to go home for Christmas, trying to spend time with his family with Christmas music playing in it, how is It's a Wonderful Life a Christmas movie? Like, what's it's because it's in winter? This is not in any way overtly a Christmas movie. So, let's use kind of our thinking, like, why do we put It's a Wonderful Life in there distinctly as Christmas movie, but obvious Christmas movie Die Hard, we're trying to exclude it? Very strange decisions kind of in how we do this. Like, throw Home Alone into this conversation as well, where it's a movie. It doesn't need to take place at Christmas. It just happens to take place at Christmas, but the movie would work during a different month as well. Anyway, where do I put It's a Wonderful Life? I'm going to throw it up on the S tier. It lived up to the hype. It is as good. It is as heartwarming. It is as much of a celebration of life and the impact that one person can have as everyone had been telling me for my entire life. So this movie absolutely kind of worked for me. All those different levels that it was supposed to. And kind of movie where you really feel like we just don't really make movies like this anymore. It has that vibe to it, but just such a great celebration of life. I guess a Christmas movie because people say it's a Christmas movie. Our next to last movie, The Nightmare Before Christmas. Is it a Halloween movie? Is it a Christmas movie? Well, it's got Christmas in the title, so we're throwing this one in the Christmas category for all of the obvious reasons. This movie has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. So another one of these movies that is absolutely beloved. And sometimes it's interesting which films you kind of expect to have those very high scores and which ones you expect to be higher, and they aren't quite as high. I was a little bit surprised that of all the movies on this list, second highest, beating out It's a Wonderful Life, The Nightmare Before Christmas. And in another sense, maybe I shouldn't be surprised by that because it is a movie that kind of had this big, gigantic cultural splash. I actually had never seen the movie, and it's a movie that my kids really wanted to watch a couple years back. So I watched it for the first time because 30 years after it came out, my children in elementary school were like, I want to watch The Adventures of Jack Skellington. I want to see A Nightmare Before Christmas. They really wanted to check out the film. Where do I land on it? I'm going to put it in the B category. The highly Tim Burton vibes and stuff like that aren't really my thing. I can respect it. I appreciate it. There's a novelty to it. I can sit down and go, oh, these are some fun songs. I love the combination of the creepy with the Christmas all together. It's truly unique. But is that a movie that I'm throwing on every Christmas as per Sean's tastes? I'm not. All of the movies, A tier, S tier, let's watch them every year. But that's not the case with this movie for me. I will if my kids want to. I'll do whatever they like, and it's good. I'm not gonna are we really doing this? But for me personally, it's in the good category. It's probably one I respect more than I specifically enjoy. It's in that category for me. So that's gonna be the B. Our final movie on the list, The Holdovers. This is a film that came out just last year, and it has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. And if you didn't see this film, it's so unfortunate. Movies like this, if they came out in the 80s, the 90s, the early zeros, this would have been this big, gigantic hit film because it's funny. It is a drama. It's got a lot of heart and emotion to it. And movies like that used to be big hits. But more recently, they just kind of get lost in all of the noise. And unfortunately, I feel like that's what happened with this fantastic film. It's about a teacher at kind of this boarding school, and just a few of the people are left there as the holdovers that didn't go home for Christmas. And so this teacher, it's kind of this cranky guy, has to watch over the holdovers. And you get all of the humor that comes with, the cranky curmudgeon teacher. But then you start diving into why these kids have been left behind, why this teacher is at this school, and the way that he feels like he's been hurt by the world so much. And so it's just like a very sweet film. It can be tragic at times. It can be very funny at times. Just a classic movie that covers so much emotional range. And I wish more people had seen it. So where am I going to throw this one? I'm going to throw this one in the A category. As of right now, I've only seen it the one time last year. So I don't think I can throw it up in the S tier quite yet or anything like that. But it was a really, really good film that I want more people to check out. It's just like a classic. It's even designed to kind of feel like outside of time, where the cameras that they use, the setting, the time period where it takes place, all of it just kind of has this other quality to it. It's sometime in the past, and it feels like a movie both in style as well as the look. It feels like a movie that could have come out 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I love that about the film. This is an A tier film for me. Alrighty, here is my completed bracket where I place everything. A couple of controversial picks in there. Other ones I felt were pretty generally agreed upon. Which ones of these are the classics? You can create your own at that link down below. Share it on your Instagram stories. Tag me and I'll share some of those. You can check out some of my other Christmas classic videos right over here. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.